I'm going to go ahead with the meeting beginning ritual now. 起立，面向佛堂，参加先鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，参加各位的传世鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please be seated.
63 says, act without action, manage without meddling, taste without tasting, great, small, many, few, respond to hatred with virtue. Plan difficult tasks through the simplest tasks. Achieve large tasks through the smallest tasks. The difficult tasks of the world must be handled through the simple tasks. The large tasks of the world must be handled through the small tasks. Therefore, sages never attempt great deeds all through life. Thus, they can achieve greatness. One who makes promises lightly must deserve little trust. One who sees many easy tasks must encounter much difficulty. Therefore, sages regard things as difficult, so they never encounter difficulties all through life. Okay, so let me provide some overall remarks on this chapter. One point that I will make again in just a little bit, a few slides from now, is that, in my opinion, this chapter is the #1 most practical, most useful chapters of the entire Tao Te Ching. I use it myself. I follow it religiously, you might say, and I do exactly what Lao Tzu says for absolutely every project I have, whether it's for work or for personal hobbies, home projects, etc. I do exactly what Lao Tzu says, and it's proven to be incredibly useful and incredibly powerful. So the very last part of it, I think that as we delve into this chapter, section by section, line by line, we may not be able to get to the very last the section of this chapter. So I want to say that don't fall into the trap of superficiality and look at the last few lines, like the first few lines, in sort of a stereotypical fashion, where the Tao is like a bunch of contradictory statements and that's it. So you could, if you wanted to look for that, you would point to something like, act without action. Oh, do without doing. I get it. And then toward the very end of this chapter, you can look at things like, for the sages, they never attempt great deeds. They regard all things as difficult, and therefore they never encounter difficulties. Is that a contradiction? Is that a paradox? So what I want to say is that when you delve into the Tao with sufficient depth, you realize that the so-called paradox, the contradictions, are just the result of insufficient understanding and a stereotypical view of the Asian the quote-unquote wise old man talking in riddles, speaking enigmatically, providing puzzles that are difficult to decipher. Well, that's not really the Tao. When you get into this chapter, you discover that these things are actually very easy to understand once you see them the way that the ancients did. Okay, so before we do that, as usual, we want to take a look at the hidden structure of a chapter. So if you scan around for the similar characters from one line to the next, you will find some possibilities. So I have saved you that work and highlighted some of the characters, not all of them, but some of the characters that are repeating from line to line. So if you take a look at the first 3 lines, you notice that the middle character is all all the same. Furthermore, I think it's a kind of a no-brainer that for the first three lines, the first character and the last character are exactly the same. Now, they are the same character, but the meaning in the first usage and the last usage are subtly different, where the last character is invested with additional contextual meaning. So we'll talk about how that's consistent throughout, and then we will wrap it up with deciphering this entire section. So you can tell that's one section, and then looking further down, you can also see, I didn't mark them, but you can also see that the third and fourth characters in line 6 and line 7 are the same. Then from 8, 9, 10, 11, we have the ABAB structure, where 8 and 10 have a lot in common. 3 characters are the same. And then 9 and 11 also have 3 characters in common. So that's a clue to us, even without checking the translation. That's a clue to tell us that, well, those actually belong to one section. So now you can see, sort of like with X-ray vision, the hidden structure of the Tao Te Ching with a beginning section, a middle section, and an ending. The beginning section talks about how to live. The middle section, how to get things done. And the last section brings it home to talk about the sages. So this is what we're going to explore today, section by section, line by line. Starting with the first 3 lines. So I know many people that are tuning in are interested in learning something about Chinese. So here's a good way to learn these characters, because they're simple characters and they sound simple. Wei wu wei, the first line. Translated as act without action, so easily misconstrued as do nothing. Do without doing, that sort of idea. But that is only if you misunderstand and assume that the first character means exactly the same as the last character. So that's not an uncommon mistake. Even among the people who are native Chinese speakers, native speakers of Mandarin, they will sometimes come to me and ask, well, this character and this character, they are exactly the same. How come you translate them differently? And that's when I need to point out to them that oftentimes in English as well as Chinese, in language in general, meaning of a particular word is contextual. Same spelling, same word in English can mean dramatically different things depending on where it is used. So in Chinese, they're oftentimes related. Meaning can oftentimes be tangential, connected, and yet be a little bit different. So what the actual meaning is of wei wu wei is to do without excessive actions, like too much actions. So when you think of it that way, to do nothing is actually one of the possibilities of doing without excessive actions. So when you look at a situation, you may realize that any action whatsoever, anything you do is actually excessive, is actually not necessary, not really called for. So you do nothing in that particular situation. All you do is observe. And indeed, if what you had seen, what you perceived before was accurate, then everything will proceed exactly as you thought it would, as you anticipated, and there was no action necessary on your part. So that's when line 1 is actually do nothing. But that's only one of the cases. There are many other cases where when you look at a situation, you realize that you need to do something, but something little, that you want to make sure you don't overdo it, that you don't do too much. You do just enough. And your unattached action compels you to not get carried away. So having done just enough with a light touch, with a gentle touch, you then just let it be, knowing that the nudge was all it took. So example, in an election, I don't mean this one, I mean any election. 为无为 means doing your due diligence, what you ought to do to exercise your franchise of citizenship, to learn about the issues that you're supposed to vote on, that you're supposed to know about, be concerned with, and then cast your vote. Show up, cast your vote, or vote by mail. However you do it, you want to make sure that you exercise your right. And that's it. Once you have cast your vote, you can let it go. You can avoid being too attached to it. So my friend Robert just made a great point that if you become too attached to news reporting and to the point where what the reporters are talking about is affecting you so deeply, affecting your mood, your state of mind, and robbing you of all peace, then you have a situation where you know you are not following the Tao very closely. That is, you are letting the attachment to news reporting, positive outcome, negative outcome, passing judgments on them, and letting them affect you, and letting them have too much power over you. So those are manifestations of attachment and to be avoided in the Tao perspective. So that makes complete sense in this context. So the bottom line is that as Tao cultivators, we fulfill our civic duty, and you can change your own thoughts, but you can never change other people. So if the results turn out to be not what you're looking for, what you expected, what you thought for sure was going to happen, then what we have to do, we have no other choice, is to accept reality and move on. Life goes on. Life has to continue on. And what this is also saying, and I fully accept that this is one of the consequences, is that the people who are using up a lot of time and energy in protests that won't change anything, that will be overdoing this whole attachment thing. That would be contrary to the Tao. So, and I hope that as I am speaking to everyone listening online, that no one has already made plans to participate in some protest out there that won't change anything. So hopefully you will reconsider and just allow matters to proceed. If you feel for sure that protesting will actually do some good, then who am I to stop you? But based on past experience, based on observation, it's not real likely that we will, at this point in time, be able to accomplish anything with further protest. So that's the first line right there. Acting without action, just remember, it's all about detachment. It's all about not going overboard, not doing too much, not being too so emotional that you feel like you haven't done enough, you have to do more. So detachment is a key word. Let's take a look at the next slide. And the next slide, and also the next one. So in Pinyin, in Mandarin, this is 是无是. So it's similar to 为无为. It doesn't mean to manage without managing. So the last, here, as I mentioned before, the first character and the last character have related but different meaning. So just like in the first line, the last character is invested with additional meaning of unattached action. Here, the last character is invested with additional contextual meaning of micromanagement. So how do we know that? Well, two ways we know that. Number one, when we understand the meaning of this entire chapter, then we'll look at the first three lines and say, of course, that's what it means, that's what it has to mean. It can't possibly mean anything else. Everything is so clear. Number two is that ancient commentaries that have been written pretty much from the time that the Tao Te Ching was written to today so throughout history, the commentaries are remarkably consistent in confirming that indeed this interpretation is the right one. So what is the real Tao of management? If you're in management position, then the idea is that there are three parts to what you do. There's the planning part of it. As a manager, you must make plans. Not only must you make plans to manage, you must also think about alternative plans. That is, plan A, plan B, sometimes even a plan C for contingencies, for things not panning out exactly the way you thought. So planning is important. The planning of your allocation of resources, who should I get to do a particular job for how long, and how much resources should I devote to that? Those are all part of planning. Then you delegate that work that you have planned. Person X, you are responsible for A, B, C, and then person Y, person Z, you guys are responsible for the other letters, EDF, or some of the other tasks that you have allocated to them. The idea is that you are the manager, you manage, you dole out things for people to do. Then, most importantly, what this line speaks to is that once you have assigned those tasks, you leave people alone so that they can do what they're supposed to do. Now, if you had done your job correctly as a manager, then you've already assigned the tasks to the best people who have the right expertise. You have hired the right people into appropriate positions, so they know their jobs. You don't need to do their jobs for them. That isn't your job description. Your job description is to manage them. So the idea is that if you meddle, which unfortunately we see this a lot in today's world, we see people who don't really understand the Tao of management. So they will do the last character a lot. They will meddle and micromanage, constant interference where you're not doing that right. Hey, let me show you how to do it right. And then, moments later, repeat that process again. Backseat driving, do this, do that. It's like all of your employees or direct reports are puppets, and you are the puppet master, and you have to control every single one of them. That gets extremely exhausting. So, and what I have seen more often than any other kind of manager are managers who meddle like this, who try to control everyone, and then complain about how exhausted they are. Well, there is a reason for that exhaustion, is because they try to do everyone's job for them. So that's not the right way to go. That's not the Tao. And you can see already in this line, there's the same overall idea that we see in the first line, which is detachment. Do what you do, excel at what you do, but do it from a perspective of detachment, so you don't get so emotionally involved that you lose your head. So that same thing will carry through to line 3 as well. So the pinyin looks exactly like the first one, wei wu wei, but this is wei wu wei. So it's the 4th pitch. For a native Mandarin speaker, they are completely different sounds because of the pitch difference. To an English speaker who's not used to pitch changes in Chinese, in Mandarin, they may sound exactly the same, but they're not the same. So it's a different pitch, the 4th pitch. So wei means taste, and this is difficult to understand. This is, of the 3 lines, this is probably the trickiest one of the 3. And for that reason, when I checked the other translations that are available in the marketplace, I noticed that in the #1 best-selling translation, which is very poorly done, but nobody knows that, in that translation, line number 3 is completely eliminated from translation and not translated, skipped, jumped over, and the reason is because the translator figures, well, who's to know? It doesn't matter. And then there's another translation that renders it as taste the tasteless, which that's not a profound saying. That's just a mistranslation. So it's taste without tasting, but the tasting part, the last one, has the same additional contextual meaning invested in it, just like the last characters in line 1 and line 2. So the first taste is not a literal tasting of food. It means to get a taste of the situation, to get the flavor of the situation, to know what's going on. So this is consistent with lines 1 and 2, which is all about acting in the world of people, managing people. So number 3 is also about that. It's about management. It's about things to do. It's about actions to take. So the first taste is to get the flavor of the situation. The last character has the additional meaning of being so fully immersed in the flavor of the situation that you lose your objectivity, that you lose your head, and therefore lose your detachment. So this line is basically saying that know what's going on, but don't get so into it that you forget the important things in life. So again, this is all about detachment. All 3 lines are about the way of the Tao in doing things extremely well, and yet not be zealous, not be overly emotional, not trip over yourself, not end up in a situation where you commit self-sabotage. Okay, so that's lines 1, 2, and 3. Next, in line 4, we have a line that can be literally translated. So the 4 characters are translated as 4 English words directly: great, small, many, few. And it just means that no matter what you do in life, big things, little things, and no matter who you deal with, many people, few people, process many things or few things, no matter what, the Tao is always the same. So when it comes to taste without tasting, manage without interference, without meddling, act without actions, or without excessive actions, it's something that applies whether you do big things or little things, whether you deal with many people or very few people. And then we have a line: respond to hatred with virtue. So oftentimes in discussing the Tao Te Ching, I feel as if Lao Tzu is reaching across 2,500 years to talk directly to us. It is almost as if Lao Tzu is saying that, hey everybody, I know what's going on, and here's my advice. So I know that many people, feeling very offended, feeling that something wrong has been done, are likely to want to respond in kind. They call us a bunch of names. We're gonna give as good as we take. We're gonna call them names. They're doing this and that to us. They're going online. They're saying all these nasty things. Well, we're going to strike back, etc. I know many people are thinking that, and many people are regarding the other side, quote unquote, no matter who that other side is, they're regarding the other side with hatred that they feel the other side has directed against them. So that is also not the Tao. What is the Tao? Well, the Tao, to quote a line from one of the recent speeches, is that when they go low, we go high. So that's exactly what it means to say respond to hatred with virtue. So, and now even without the current situation, even without the recent events, let's talk about your life. Let's talk about what's going to happen to you from this point on. That's important. In fact, that's more important than what has already happened this last week and the weeks before that. Now, it's a certainty. You know for sure that you will encounter negativity at some point in your life. Big things, little things, from many people, from a few people, with many things, with few things. So that's going to happen. Not sure exactly when, but you know it will happen. So when it does happen, when there's negative energy coming at you, and I have seen news reports about people, minority people walking by a political rally, and the people who are all riled up by the political rally, feeling sort of like empowered to express how they really feel, begin hurling insults at the passerby, and that's when they, that's when they feel put upon. That's when they react in a very negative fashion, and they talk about that. So I know that actually happens, and I know that it's sort of like a metaphor in life. In life, at some point, that's going to happen as well. So it would be a mistake to fight fire with fire. The Tao is not about vengeance. There's no getting even with somebody in the Tao. The Tao is more like living well is the best revenge. For you to do well for yourself, that's better than any act of reprisal, any act of retribution that you can inflict upon your enemy. If you just do well by yourself. And the ideal in the Tao is that when you are able to live well, do well, and set a good example for others, your erstwhile enemies will become curious and say, well, I hated your guts, but I don't understand, you don't seem to be hating me, and you seem to be doing really well. What's going on? That opens up the possibility that the enemies can become friends. So remember, the Tao is never, but they started it. That's okay for kindergarten, Johnny, why'd you do that? Well, they started it. Okay, that's okay for toddlers. It's not okay for grown adults. Tao cultivators practice virtues consistently, not conditionally. So one of the reasons why I counsel everyone against being involved in debates is because sometimes but they started it, or they are just as bad, is oftentimes the tactics being used by debaters. And what I want to do is to kind of let everyone know that, just as one example, sensitive topic, when it comes to a debate about, and I see this a lot, I see this in person, in real life, as well as online, people debate about race relations in America. So at some point, someone is going to say, well, in country X, they are even worse. Or so-and-so people, they are even worse. So there's a couple of things that I want to make sure everyone understands. First, from the Tao Te Ching, just because someone else is engaging in reprehensible behavior does not give us license to do the same. That's number one. And I hope no one is suggesting that just because someone else is doing something horrible, that we get to partake in the horrible activities ourselves. That's never true. Never true for anyone. Number two, America is not country X. America is the country that prides itself in the American dream, in the melting pot, in people coming together from the many, one. So America has hyped up itself as the place where that can happen, where unity can occur, where people can get beyond their biases, their prejudices, and come together as one country. That being the case, you can't compare America to country X. You can't compare Americans to some other people somewhere else. We have to live up to our ideals, ideals that we have expressed, ideals that we have taught in every generation since the founding of this country. Okay. And therefore, there's no go back where you're coming from. That is just about the most un-American thing that anyone can say. Okay. Now let's get into the two, I would say, critical lines in this chapter. That's what I call the most practical advice on life. First, plan difficult tasks through the simplest tasks. And I call this the number one most practical and most useful part of the Tao Te Ching. Why do I say that? I feel that this is the blueprint. This right here is the blueprint for succeeding at pretty much anything that you set your sight to, that you put your mind to. No matter how big it is, big or small, big tasks, big projects, grand aspirations, little things you want to accomplish, this is the Tao that can be applied. Whether it's for many people or very few people, this is the Tao that can be applied. It may seem simple, but it's pretty darn powerful. It's very deep. It's very powerful. And it's totally contrary to the notion of swallowing the frog first thing in the morning. I don't know if people have heard about this before, so let me explain. It's actually a popular notion in some time management, self-improvement circles, and I first encountered it 25 years ago in a self-improvement seminar where the self-improvement guru gave a whole bunch of examples about how he would swallow the frog first thing in the morning. Now, I want to set your mind at ease and reassure you that he was not talking literally, that he didn't keep a whole bunch of live frogs in his home, and that every morning he would pick one and swallow that. So that didn't happen. He was using the metaphor that frogs represented things that he needed to do. And out of all the things he needed to do, all the frogs, there would be one frog that's the biggest and ugliest frog. That is the thing that he dreaded doing the most. The thing that was the most troublesome, most difficult, most time-consuming, the thing that he wanted to avoid at all costs. That's the biggest and ugliest frog. So, time management guru said what he would do every morning is to take that big, ugly frog and he would swallow it. He would eat that up as the very first thing that he would do in the morning. Why? Well, it's because once he has done that first thing in the morning, everything else that day will seem easy by comparison. Everything else that day will seem like it's of little effort. You know, all the other frogs are a lot smaller, much easier to swallow than the biggest, ugliest frog. So he said, well, the time to do that is the very first thing in the morning, because that is you at your freshest, you know, just woken up, your mind is fresh, and you have energy. Don't wait until the end of the day when you're run down and tired and you just want to be left alone. That's not the time to swallow the ugly frog. The time is in the morning. So 25 years ago, listening to this, you know, as a young man, I found myself nodding in agreement. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. And I was taking notes studiously. Swallow, big, ugly frog. And then I try to put that into actual practice in my life. Now, my big problem at that time was procrastination. So I definitely needed some kind of advice to overcome my tendency to procrastinate. I try to swallow that ugly frog in the morning, in actual life, day after day, and I found that I kept putting it off. I kept putting off swallowing the big ugly frog. So the next day, the big ugly frog is still there, croaking. And I'm still like, I don't want to swallow you. Maybe tomorrow. Okay. And then the next day, well, maybe next week, you know. I kept putting it off. It was not solving my number one problem, procrastination. So it never, ever worked for me. And when I check with other people, I found that sometimes, even initially, they succeeded at swallowing a big ugly frog, but after that, they didn't go back and do that same thing again. And that's because, same thing, the tendency to procrastinate. I'm not going to do that now. I don't want to worry about it now. I can't deal with it now. I'll deal with it later. So, and now that I check back on the time management guru, I see that he wasn't that successful either. So if he practiced what he taught, then it wasn't the way to success. So the way to success turns out to be the very opposite, which is what Lao Tzu says. And I'm going to explain why. There's a couple more slides after this to talk about the details. So first, I'm just going to say that it's the opposite approach to swallowing the big ugly frog. Then I'm going to talk about line 7 for just a moment. This is talking about the big projects, the grand undertaking versus the little things, the little items in your to-do list that you can cross out one after another. The big project, any big project will seem overwhelming, can even seem impossible when you try to take it in all at once. That's the nature of a big complex project. So sometimes we forget the reality, and the reality is that the big project is not one thing that is to be done at one time by one person or one team. It's always composed of smaller sub-projects, always, no exception. And the sub-projects, always, no exception, are always composed of tasks. And many of the tasks can be broken down into subtasks. So there are things that need to be done, but a big thing, the Great Wall of China was built brick by brick. So any grand undertaking has to be done in tiny bits at a time. So let's move on. I want to expand line 6 and talk about the details. So lines 8 and 9, the difficult tasks of the world must be handled through the simple tasks. 8 and 9 expand on and emphasize line 6, plan difficult tasks through the simple tasks. So I call this the miracle cure for procrastination. And I know it is because it's proven to be very effective in my life. Everyone that I have taught this to has been able to overcome procrastination for good. And it's not so much battling procrastination, defeating procrastination. It's more like procrastination just isn't a factor anymore. It's like disappeared into thin air. Now, the only way that you can know that you have overcome procrastination is that you are actually doing something that you've been putting off, and you're continuing to do it. And actually, the more you do it, the easier it is to keep going until it becomes quite natural for you to speed along. That's when you know that procrastination for that activity is gone for good. So this is the reason why this method works. It's literally asking, well, what is the easiest way to get going? Okay, do that. If you're still having trouble getting going, find an even easier way to get going by breaking down that easy thing into easier things. So my challenge to everyone is to prove this to yourself. I know many people procrastinate just like I used to. So find something that you've been putting off, that you've been postponing, that you've been avoiding. So my challenge is for you to actually look at it, think about it, consider how it can be broken down into little pieces. Remember, no matter what it is, it's always individual action items, no matter what it is you've been putting off. And out of all the action items that you have put together, I want you to then ask, what is the simplest action item? What is the thing that will take the least amount of effort or the least amount of time? Is this something that you can do right away, like now? Is this something that you can do right now? And if it isn't something that you can do right now. Find the simplest action that you can do right now. Repeat number one, break it down some more, and then look for the simple action again. And if it is something that you can do right away, do it right away. Take action on it immediately. So there's more. Let's take a look at how 10 and 11 expand on line 7. Because of the overall brevity of the Tao Te Ching, anytime something gets reiterated, anytime there's repetition, you want to pay special attention. So there's a saying that I think many people have heard: how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? And sometimes people like to wrap a story around this, talk about this African village that had this elephant carcass that they need to consume. How do they eat it? Well, they eat it one bite at a time, etc. But the idea is the same. The idea is that you have this giant task before you, and therefore you nibble at it a little bit at a time. And that's similar to this saying, but similar, not exactly the same. And I'll point out some of the differences. So if you find yourself facing something that's too big to handle, that's only because it's not broken down. It's not yet broken down into bite-sized chunks, digestible chunks. So what Lao Tzu says is guaranteed to work because of these points. One, you're looking for the small, easy tasks that can be done quickly. Once they are done, once they are completed, it gives you earned satisfaction. I underlined earned satisfaction because when you have actually gotten your hands involved, when you have actually done something, and you can justifiably mark it off, you spend time and effort on it, so you know that you have earned the completion of that. There's a certain satisfaction that is unlike anything else. So that's what I mean by earned satisfaction. You've earned it. It's a kind of positive energy that you can use by immediately applying it to the next small, easy task. So there's going to be something else that is almost as easy, but not quite, almost just as small, or possibly, in that same category of ease. So use that energy to help you do the next one, and you will get earned satisfaction from completing that as well. And this continues on. Every time you complete something, you earn the satisfaction for that completion. It's iterative, it repeats itself, and it builds greater and greater momentum. You get more and more energy, and it's like a hump that you are working yourself over. At some point, when you're over the hump, everything else becomes easier. You realize that, wow, okay, well, this is going really great. I'm in the middle of completing these tasks. I don't want to stop. This is the complete opposite of when you started, which is, I don't want to start. So I don't want to stop is when you are well on your way, you're on the downward slope on the other side of the hump. It's actually harder to stop or slow down than to just keep going and complete the whole thing. That's when it really works and works really well. Okay, so I'll address some objections, and then we have to go to the summary for today. So there are some differences between that and the elephant eating metaphor. So, one particular expert says, well, the elephant carcass will begin to smell bad, stink up the whole village. Now, I'll just point out that people know this. People who are procrastinators, like I used to be, we all know this, that there are things that we've been putting off for years and years. That's like an elephant carcass that's been sitting out there for years and years, and maybe has become fossilized. So not a great example, not a perfect analogy for that. So even though doing little things, bite-sized chunks at a time, seems like it's slow going, and maybe the giant carcass will begin to smell bad. It's infinitely better than to not touch the carcass at all and just allow it to rot on its own. So it's and the other thing to point out is that the method of Lao Tzu isn't exactly like eating the elephant, only because as you progress, as you gain the energy, the momentum, the satisfaction, the excitement, you actually get better and better at doing that thing. It's like you can eat bigger and bigger chunks, more and more difficult tasks. Your power increases the more you go. So like the mouth getting bigger and bigger. Or another way to think about it is that from your perspective, it is as if bite-sized chunks, your definition of bite-sized chunks becomes bigger and bigger. It's still the same to you. It's still bite-sized, but you are able to handle it. And to other people, it seems like, what you're doing is pretty incredible, but you build yourself gradually over to that level. And another objection, you get sick of it, meaning that it could be tedious. Well, the method explained by Lao Tzu is that you don't have to keep doing the same thing over and over again. You're looking for the easy things. So you could be shifting around. You could be parallel tasking. You could have multiple parallel tracks that you can work on, and you can shift among them, depending on what is of the greatest interest, what is the easiest thing to get done. So at any one moment, you're always on easy streets. You're always at the easiest possible level. Okay, that's all the time we have for today. Let's move on to the conclusion. So out of what we have talked about today, I would like to suggest the 3 steps for you to do anything, to achieve greatness. Number 1, plan out all the things you have to do. Here, I want to ask everyone to strike the right balance between meticulous preparation, a lot of plans, with a flexible approach. That is, you don't want to spend all of your time planning out every little detail and never actually doing anything. And you don't want to be so stuck to the plan that you cannot handle anything that is different when the time comes to actually do something. Number 2, easy. Pick the smallest and easiest items you can get out of the way quickly. These are the lowest hanging fruits. These are the first fruits to pick. In everything that you have to do, there are numerous low hanging fruits for you to pick. And if you don't have such fruits to pick, you don't have anything small or easy, it's only because you haven't broken things down enough, so you got to go back to the drawing board and break things down some more until you actually have them. So, as you follow this process, you will generate energy and momentum, and once you get revved up, it becomes easier and easier, and soon, I can guarantee you that if you follow this, you'll be done and you will be happy. And that's our meeting for today.
Let's go ahead and do the meeting ending ritual, everybody. 起立，面向佛堂，持架3鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，3鞠躬，持架规格是1鞠躬，接班1鞠躬。Okay, everybody, we are done.
Participate in the Tao meeting by joining us online. For information, go to taoism.net/Tao